Asking me what I do is a really interesting way to start because it's very difficult for me to answer. A lot of people think I'm a musician, and I generally try and persuade them that's not true, because I really have very little musical ability in terms of being able to play a tune on an instrument. But what I do is kind of happens within the space where music happens in society, and people kind of relate to what I do as if it was music, but it doesn't really sound that much like music. In fact, the less it sounds like music, the more I like it. So I think of myself as someone who works with sound rather than music. Some people call it noise. I don't really mind that, but I tend to prefer to call it sound. When I was young, when I went to university, which was at the end of the 1970s, I went to Dunedin, and suddenly Dunedin became a really interesting place to be, with a lot of really great rock bands, and I became kind of involved with people who were musicians, and I did a bit of writing about music for magazines and stuff. I did was a bit of a critic. I guess I wanted to do something creative, and despite the fact that I had, as far as I could tell, very little ability as a musician, I kind of found a way to get myself involved. At a certain point in 1987, when I found myself in a band with some other like-minded people, the possibility that I could work in the music space but do my own thing became possible, and that band is the Dead Sea, which we formed in 1987, Michael Morley, Robbie Yates and I, and still exists today. Okay, so here we are outside the Empire Tavern. This is on busy Princes Street, the middle of the south end of the central business district of Dunedin. Back in 1981, it was a really nothing kind of a place with no people wanting to drink there, and so the top bar right up on the top floor there, which was a Bavarian beer bar, was opened up to bands, and that's when the Dunedin sound really got going here. The first time I came here was in November 1981 to see The Clean. It was one of the most important nights of my life, and this is where I first played a rock gig in 1984, supporting my flatmate's band, The Rip. Dunedin in the 1980s was one of the really exciting places in the world to be, actually, for rock music. Every month it seemed someone would be making a record, or would have started a new band, or basically got much better at what they were doing before, and it was just a really, I guess, fertile time with lots of ideas and things going around. And it was also very supportive. People were willing to try new stuff and were willing to put up with people like me who were pushing the envelope as far as competence was concerned. And so I was able to do things, because I lived there, that I probably wouldn't have done anywhere else. They built that on the back. They've expanded it quite a bit. So this house is 134 St David Street. I lived here in 1984 with my friends Michael Morley, Alistair Galbraith and Bob Scott. And this is where Michael and I first started recording together, and later on we formed the Dead Sea. When we lived here in 1984, this whole neighbourhood was full of musicians. There were people living all around the place. Graham Downs of the Villains, who were a big band at the time, used to live just over the road in Agnew Street. This was my room in the corner, and there were 4 of us living in here, and it was one of those places where we had a lot of parties, we had a lot of fun, and got to know a lot of musicians. This was when I was finding out about the Dunedin music scene, and it was a really exciting time for me. But this is where the first stuff that we did together happened, and where I bought my first guitar amp from Alistair, an amplifier I still have and use all the time, which I bought for $60. By the time I moved to Christchurch in 1994 with my family, Dunedin was probably past its prime in terms of the scene. People had moved away, people had started doing different things. It wasn't as exciting as it had been. And I'd also had quite a few years of doing that and really was interested in a change. And I knew, because I was in this really great band, that I could move away and yet continue to, do what I wanted to do, because we didn't, by that point we'd been together for 7 years. We didn't have to practice every week. We could, manage quite easily living in different towns, and Christchurch and Dunedin are not so far apart, and I tend to go down pretty frequently, and we do stuff when I'm there. Okay, here we are outside Chick's Hotel in Port Chalmers. It's one of the older hotels in Port Chalmers, and when I lived here it wasn't a place bands played, but in the last 10 years or so it's become a really important venue for rock music in the South Island. And I've played here several times. They have a festival every 2 years called Lines of Flight, which happens here. And so I've played with the Dead Sea and also on my own on quite a few occasions. Port Chalmers is full of interesting venues. The Presbyterian Church just up the hill with the clock tower is a venue that I played in a couple of years ago, and it's got wonderful acoustics. It really is a special place to play. It sounds fantastic in there, and it's great that the local Presbyterian congregation are willing to have some pretty weird music going on in their church, so good on them. But I guess that's what Port Chalmers is like. It's a very creative town. Generally when I go down to Dunedin, I generally drink a bit of beer, maybe some fine wines, eat food, sit around, talk a lot, and every now and again we set up equipment and play some stuff and record it. In the beginning we had rough songs that we would use as sort of skeletons to work around, but in the last 15 years or so, we've completely made everything up on the spot, and that goes for public shows, performances we do, making albums. Everything just comes out of thin air. We just play and see what happens, and we record that. We own all our own recording gear, so we don't have to go to studios. We can do it at home, which is the way we like to work, and it's a very natural way to work, really. No two Dead Sea shows are the same, but they're also all the same. Basically, it's the same people doing the same kind of thing, because once you get to know our work reasonably well, we're quite easy to pick out from the crowd because there aren't that many bands that actually sound like us. So, you know, on a blindfold test, probably most of our fans could pick us fairly quickly. But having said that, the actual sequence of sounds is always different. But the overall sound of the band, it's a signature sound. You can pick it. Right, so we're doing this interview in my studio, which is a really special place for me. It used to be a garage that was falling down, and I rebuilt it myself from the ground up and turned it into an unusual little cave full of weird stuff. But it's a space that I really enjoy spending time in, and it's remarkably warm and incredibly earthquake proof. Basically in here I've got this workbench with my computer, I've got a stereo for playing music, and I love to listen to music in my office. I've got a big collection of all sorts of weird CDs, this kind of thing, which I spend a lot of time listening to. I've got a record collection over here, because of course I've got to have my own albums to hand. I have a special section on the shelf for Dead Sea albums. It's quite large, he said proudly. And I've also got a whole bunch of weird equipment. This is one of my portable tape recorders. I use this in playing shows. It plays 1/4-inch wide analog tape, and what I tend to do with this is actually make huge loops of tape that are continuous, and I'll play them by putting one end of the loop around like a microphone stand or a ladder or something on stage, and then controlling it from this end by pressing play and record and fast forward, and it's like a different kind of musical instrument. I spend a lot of time fooling around with obsolete technology.
Fantastic.
Can I show you something else?
Oh, so you show us anything you want.
I'd also like to show you one of my most recent projects, which is a box called No More Driver Call Me. It comes in a pizza box, and inside there's a whole range of things. There's a whole bunch of CDs, there's a DVD, there's an entire book, ta-da, and you get a special poster.
And what does that say?
The poster is a photograph of a scene in London showing a tower block and a church tower side by side, and up the top it says, "The passions," whoa, dropped it. "The passions have been sufficiently interpreted. The point now is to invent new ones," which is a quote from one of my favourite authors. The quote is from a book by a Frenchman called Guy Debord. There you go, who's one of my heroes. Not particularly well known, but one of my heroes nonetheless. And I was given funding by Creative New Zealand to make these box sets. There are 100 of them. It's a limited edition, and it's not for sale. It's only for gift. So I'm able to give this to other artists that I admire around the world, which is a project I've been working on for the last couple of years. It's still going on. So here we are at the back of Grey Street in Port Chalmers. This house over the fence, which is quite a long way back from the road and quite difficult to see, was home to me and other members of the Dead Sea from about 1988 through to 1991. It was a huge house. In there we had anything between 3 and 5 people living. We had a studio set up in the front room. We had a brewery in the laundry. We had all sorts of things around the house that we could use. It was the home of Expressway Records, so there was a factory making cassettes in one of the downstairs offices. Everybody had both a bedroom and a studio or a workroom. It was a fantastic house, but it was falling down. One year we shut the door in June at the back door, couldn't open it again for 3 months, and we had to go in and out the laundry window. So it was really, there were holes in the floor. It was in a terrible state. Someone has really done a great job with the place. It looks fantastic. And I'm sure that the back door opens freely these days. Well, one of the things that makes me, I guess, a little bit unusual as a musician is that actually I spend probably as much time reading and writing as I do actually making music. And I've written a few books, to be honest, and I'm currently working on a degree. I'm doing a PhD through a Melbourne university called RMIT. Their art school has a sound art program, and I'm doing a doctorate through them, and that's actually why I have all these piles of books here and this laptop computer. I've been sitting here working on my doctorate today. Right, so as well as doing the doctorate, I have already written a book which I'm very proud of, which is this one. It's called Left-Handed Blows. It's a collection of essays about sound and art and the place that has in society and what it's all about, really. Because I've been living in Littleton for 20 years and therefore I can't do band stuff all the time. I only do it from time to time. After a few years I got to a point where I wanted to do my own stuff, and a lot of that has been working on my own as a solo artist, and I do shows by myself from time to time, and I also make recordings. I have a whole lot of my own studio equipment, and every now and again I'll sit down and actually construct a recording. A lot of what I do uses obsolete technology, so I have a lot of old tape machines which are pre-digital analog machines, and so I've taught myself to do all sorts of stuff that was state of the art around the time I was born but is really out of date now in terms of sound technology, and I really get a kick out of using those outdated technologies because they're really limiting. They actually constrain what you can do, and that means you have to be that much more ingenious, because one of the problems with digital technology is you could fix any mistake, you can pretty much do anything you like, you can auto-tune your vocals if you can't sing, and I don't like doing that. I like to keep the imperfections, keep the mistakes, and make them part of my sound, I guess. I'm going to demonstrate one of my obsolete musical technologies. This is a clavioline. It's a synthesizer built in 1949. This is the keyboard part. You can see wiring, very technological. I bought this from my friend Alistair Galbraith, who owned two of them. He got them in garage sales in Dunedin, but they are pretty rare. So this is the amplifier part. Those glass tubes are valves. It's all valve technology, no transistors used. So there you go, quite an unusual instrument. So this building here used to be known as the Wren Building. It's an old office and warehouse space here in Stafford Street in Dunedin. The top two floors were rented by my friend Alistair Galbraith. He lived here from about 1987 for about 4 or 5 years. We used to have a lot of shows here. A lot of warehouse parties where we'd sell tickets and have bands playing. So the address here is 13 Stafford Street. We used to call it Studio 13, and this is where we recorded the first Dead Sea single and our second album. So for us it was a really important spot, and we did tremendous amount of really good work here. If I'm completely honest, I absolutely love listening to my own music, and I think that's great. I think if I didn't want to listen to it, I wouldn't want to make it, because there'd be something false about that. I don't listen to it every day, obviously, but when I've done something new, one of the greatest thrills is to sit down and play it back and just find out what on earth did I do, and how does it strike me, and that's always a great thrill. And it's always great when a record comes out and you get the first copy in the mail, and you get to sort of hear and see the finished product. And I well remember when the first Dead Sea album came out, how I was almost breathless with excitement. I was beside myself with excitement that finally we'd made a record, and here it was in my hand, and I could put it on and listen to it. And I actually still do enjoy that today, which is nice, because again, if there wasn't that joy, you wouldn't want to do it. One of the funny things about my career and that of the Dead Sea in general is that we have had a lot more attention and success in other countries, notably in America, but also in the United Kingdom and Europe and Australia, even in Japan. We've been able to play shows and make records in a way that in New Zealand we can't. I think that's because what we do is a minority interest. Let's say there's only half of 1% of the population is actually going to really get what we do. In a country of 4 million people, half of 1% is 2,000 people, I think. Yeah, math's not very good there. Anyway, let's say it's 2,000 people, but in a country that's got 400 million, that's going to be 100 times as big in terms of the market. And so it's a lot easier for us to kind of project ourselves where there's just a bigger market.
Live for the first time on television, network or otherwise, it's one of the most extraordinary bands New Zealand's ever produced. Love them or hate them, I don't give a damn. We've got the Dead Sea, they're absolutely marvellous. Robbie Yeats on drums. It's a friend, I've got to say that.
We certainly have had plenty of fan encounters in our time. Obviously, any time we go out of the country to play shows, the people who go to those shows are our fans, and most of them are the nicest people you could hope to meet, but some of them are really, really, really enthusiastic, and those ones sometimes, you just, after a wee while, you just want them to shut up and go away. But they're not, they're nice people, and the very great majority of them are a real pleasure to meet, and they're very, they're good people. Oh, the craziest thing that ever happened to me with a fan was when I met a woman who had a picture of the band tattooed on her stomach. This is quite a famous incident in the Dead Sea's history, but I'd heard. In 2002, I was in Los Angeles and I met a guy who knew a woman who had a picture of the Dead Sea tattooed on her stomach below her navel. And he told me about this. I had no reason to believe it wasn't true, but I was kind of horrified to discover that it was true. And then in 2008, when we were touring America, I actually met this woman at our New York show. She came along and a mutual friend introduced her, and she showed me the tattoo. It was a little bit odd meeting her, but she was very pleasant. She wasn't mad or anything. That was my main concern, that she was actually completely crazy, but turns out she was not. I think the thing that I like most about what I get to do, because of being in the Dead Sea and being given the opportunity to become a recording artist, the best thing about it is actually meeting really great people and getting to work with really interesting people from all over the globe. It's easy for me to take it for granted, but if I actually sit back and think about all the fantastic people that I know in many countries around the world, it's a tremendous privilege, and it really has made my life a lot richer.
Something that you got from me. Our happiness is luxury puzzle. Bad politics, baby. Bad politics. Your face is full of hate today, and now there's nothing I can say, but I can cuss and I can pay for bad politics, baby. And yes, I lay in your bed and you caress my aching head. Well, I see my life become upside dead like bad politics, baby. So I slept with your friends. There are no.
Does this mean you're going to be Dr. Bruce Russell?
Yes, it does mean I'll be Dr. Bruce Russell.
Just like Dr. John Green, he got a doctorate.
Yes, just like.
Except different kind.
Have you finished?